Hey folks, David Tao with Barbend.com, and we're bringing you coverage of Day 4 of the 2023 Noble CrossFit Games. By the way, it can get a little confusing. It's Day 4, but it's only Day 2 of individual and team competition, and that's because the adaptive and age group divisions competed on the first 3 days of competition, including Tuesday and Wednesday when they competed without the individuals and teams. We've got full recaps of those linked below and at Barbend.com, but today we're going to break down who is in moving position, who's in trouble, as well as specific event recaps. So we're first going to give a recap of the leaderboards for men, women, and teams, and then we're going to break it down event by event. At the end, we'll give a little color commentary, as well as what we think you should be watching for heading into the weekend. After all, Saturday is moving day. Also want to say, if you're not already subscribed to Barbend on YouTube, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Do they still say that? Smash that subscribe button? I'm too old for that. Anyway, go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date on all things CrossFit, strongman, weightlifting, powerlifting, bodybuilding, and more. You're already watching YouTube. It's really easy. It's like one button. Just go ahead and do it. Something that gets a little confusing, and something I want to note right now, is that watching the CrossFit Games got a little more complicated this year. During the games, CrossFit actually announced a new streaming contract with ESPN, which means that the entirety of the games will not necessarily be streamed live on YouTube, at least not for folks in the United States. Turns out there'll be some blocks of time when you'll need to watch on ESPN2 or ESPN Plus. Basically, you'll need to be an ESPN subscriber. We have more details on that in our updated How to Watch article, which we've linked below. You can also find that at Barbend.com. It just kind of threw a wrench into some folks' viewing plans this weekend, certainly ours. But if you're an ESPN subscriber, it should be no issue. It is also kind of nice to see the CrossFit Games back on TV, I guess. One other thing to note, there was a big withdrawal on the individual side. Ireland's fittest woman, Emma McQuaid, she had to withdraw due to injury today, and we really hate to see her go this year. Emma's actually a friend of the brand. She's been on our podcast, so wishing you a speedy recovery, Emma. All right, let's talk about the leaderboard on the men's side. Khrennikov is currently in first place overall, taking a fairly commanding lead heading into Saturday. Don't call it a comeback. He's been here for years. Chandler Smith of the United States. Seems like Chandler's been knocking on the door of CrossFit greatness for a long time. In the late 20-teens, he kind of burst onto the regional scene, had some games qualifications, but was never able to really knock on the door of the podium. Turns out this year he might be doing just that. He's an athlete who has had a couple weaknesses in his game over the years, but looks to have shorn up a lot of those. And hey, he's certainly sitting in second place right now. So Chandler's a fan favorite. He's actually active on the CrossFit subreddit. He's also just a really nice guy and kind of a people's champ in a lot of folks' hearts already. So good to see him really living up to clearly a ton of fitness that he's built over the years, and he seems to be having a lot of fun doing it. So I just can't call that out enough, how much the people are cheering for Chandler Smith. Jeffrey Adler of Canada. Again, Adler is another one of those athletes who's kind of always knocking on the door of the podium, is placing himself in really good position heading into Saturday. Rounding out the top 5 on the men's side, we have Jay Crouch of Australia and a familiar name, Brent Fikowski, the professor from Canada. A name you're not going to see in the top 5 right now is two-time defending CrossFit Games champion Justin Medeiros, who currently sits in 16th place overall. Now, he had his worst game start ever in the first 2 events that occurred on Thursday. He started battling back, but had another disappointing finish, finishing in 30th on the 6th event of the games, which was the final event on Friday. So Medeiros has an uphill battle, and it's already begun to seem like that leader jersey is slipping away. And from my position right now, and from my perspective, seemingly unlikely that he can repeat this year. But hey, stranger things have happened. Let's talk about the women's side. Currently sitting in first place, but not by a huge margin, is Emma Lawson of Canada. Alexis Raptis of the United States currently sits in second place, and Laura Horvath, who was the odds-on favorite for the women's field coming into this games, sits in third place overall, although she's making up quite a bit of ground, it seems, and clearly has a competitor's mentality and maybe even a winner's mentality heading into Saturday. It's kind of weird. If you were watching the games, you would think that Horvath was in first place for most of the day, even though she wasn't wearing the leader's jersey. But that's just how tenaciously she's been attacking these workouts. She clearly wants to break through and not only make the podium again, but take home a championship. But Lawson and Raptis are really showcasing their fitness, and they're proving tough competitors to beat. So Horvath is going to need to continue to perform very well, hit some workouts she's really strong at, and hope that Raptis and Lawson do slip. There might be a chance for Horvath to regain some ground or to gain some new ground tomorrow, and I'm going to talk about that toward the end of this broadcast. Rounding out the top 5, 2 Americans, Alex Gazan and Ariel Lowen. Those are your top 5 competitors heading into Saturday. Nipping at their heels, I just want to point out, still relevant to the conversation, a personal favorite of mine, someone I've known for a long time, and that's Iceland's own Annie Thorisdottir, who is competing in her like 11 billionth CrossFit Games. I mean, she started this in 2009. Let's talk about the 4th event overall, the first on Friday for the individuals, and that's called Alpaca Redux. It involves some really heavy sled pushes, legless rope climbs, and kettlebell clean and jerks. Oh, kettlebells. Okay. You have my interest. It was a really grueling workout and something that challenged a lot of athletes when it came to positioning and technique and strategy, especially on the sled pushes. Literally, some athletes were coming out of their shoes on the turf. That's how intensely heavy and demanding these pushes were. As far as winners go, Khrennikov won this event by about 22nd on the men's side. On the women's side, Emma Tall, who's known for her strength and can really brute force a sled, apparently, as we saw, she gets her first ever career games win on this event. A few other names I want to note. Medeiros showed signs of life, finishing in the top 10 on this event, and Laura Horvath finished in 2nd on the women's side, which really helped catapult her up the leaderboard. Let's talk about the 2nd event of the day and the 5th overall for the individuals, ski bag. That's a weird name. Anyway, it involved calories on the ski erg and heavy sandbag squats. These were not light sandbag squats. They were heavy, 200 pounds for the men, 125 pounds for the women. Have you ever picked up a 125-pound sandbag? I have. It's really heavy. It's really awkward. It's tough to do basically anything. And the athletes had to squat with it in between rounds of calories on the ski erg. This is an event that was more challenging on the core than I think a lot of people anticipated. And it's a combination that I don't know if a lot of folks had practiced. I mean, probably not. There are like infinite movements in CrossFit. But this is one that, trust me, will leave your core smoked if you try it at home. So proceed with caution and maybe use lighter sandbags than these elite athletes, at least on your first go. On the men's side, Colton Mertens won his first career CrossFit Games event. And guess who won on the women's side? Someone who's really fit, good at monostructural movements, who's really strong and can move awkward weights for a bunch of reps. Oh yeah, Laura Horvath. She wins her 8th career CrossFit Games event. And again, further cemented herself, or at least positioned herself on the leaderboard heading into Saturday. This is a big moving event for Horvath, and one where she gained a lot of momentum and energy from the crowd and spectators. The 3rd and final event of the day, and the 6th overall for the individuals, was Helena, which was a twist on the classic CrossFit benchmark workout. It involved a run, bar muscle ups, and moderately heavy dumbbell snatches. This actually looks like a fun one, and one that I might try at a track near me. I might regret saying that. On the men's side, Jeffrey Adler of Canada was the only athlete in the entire field to finish this workout under 8 minutes, so he won. On the women's side, Jamie Simmons takes the win, and Laura Horvath actually finished in 15th place, which, again, doesn't spell defeat for her in any way. Like I said, she built a lot of momentum heading into the day, but she probably didn't finish the day like she had hoped, and this was certainly her worst performance on Friday. Before we get into teams, I want to talk about cuts. CrossFit has said that after the end of Friday's competition, the top 30 men and top 30 women will advance, which means that about 10 athletes in each of those divisions won't advance. So that's something to keep in mind. We're going to have smaller fields and fewer heats heading into the weekend. A couple names that won't be joining the athletes over the weekend because they didn't make the cut. Well, 2 on the men's side, Jason Hopper, and appearing in his final CrossFit Games as an individual, or so he says, Cole Sager, after nearly, or actually almost exactly, a decade at the toppest rung of the sport. Cole Sager has contributed a lot to the sport. He's still going to be contributing a lot as a coach and mentor. Heck, he's been on our podcast, and it was one of my favorite ever episodes to record. So Cole, thanks for all you've done, and kind of wish we'd seen you compete over the weekend, but them's the breaks, or the cuts, literally. Let's talk about the team's leaderboard, and it's no different than it was at the end of day 1 of their competition, which was actually day 3, as I described earlier in the video. It gets confusing. Anyway, basically the leaderboard hasn't changed. CrossFit Invictus is at the top, CrossFit Oslo Navy Blue is in 2nd, and CrossFit East Nashville Proven still sits in 3rd place overall. Teams had 3 events on the day. There was an Olympic total, there was the cross-country run, and a bike row hold event. And I want to narrow in on, or zoom in on, narrow in on. That doesn't make any sense. I want to zoom in on one of those events because it's relevant for the athletes on the individual side tomorrow. So at the time of this recording, we know 2 of the events tomorrow for the individuals. There's a 5K, and the athletes will run 5 kilometers. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Haven't done one of those in a while personally. No one needs to hear that. There's also an Olympic weightlifting total where athletes will look for maxes in the snatch and the clean and jerk. That one is one I'm particularly excited about. We love seeing these athletes lift heavy weight. That's also one where we see athletes pushing themselves, and I hate to bring it up, but I'm going to be watching with bated breath because I was there live in 2021 when Brooke dislocated her elbow on a max snatch ladder. These are always events that are exciting, but they can also result in injury as these athletes have a lot of wear and tear on their bodies and have a lot of stress that has accrued over the course of these events. I'm a little surprised CrossFit didn't put this earlier in the week, personally. That's just my opinion, though. I think starting with something like this might make a little more sense as opposed to after these athletes have had a lot of running and biking and gymnastics under their belts. One thing to note, Ben Smith competing on the team side, it seems like he suffered a small patella tear during the Olympic weightlifting portion of the team event. But so far, it seems like he's going to continue to try and compete. So wishing him a speedy recovery, even though he technically hasn't withdrawn from competition yet. Ben is a former fittest man on earth and a tenacious competitor. So I'm not super surprised and hope there's no long-term damage there. Anyway, people love watching these athletes lift big weights and comparing what they can lift to elite Olympic weightlifters. And, well, we'll have some more data points tomorrow after that event. A couple things to look out for tomorrow. Justin Medeiros, what's going on with him? And though he survived a cut, he's certainly not sitting in an ideal position heading into the weekend. The question isn't, will Justin Medeiros repeat? I think it's almost impossible for him to do so at this point, even if he hasn't been mathematically crunched out of the numbers. The question is, can he really make a shot at the top 10 or top 5? He's been very inconsistent and had his worst game finishes ever this weekend. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on. I don't want to wish Justin ill at all. Justin's fantastic. He's been a fantastic ambassador and champion for the sport, but clearly the pieces haven't quite stacked together how he wanted this weekend. Laura Horvath finds herself in podium position, and it seems like some of her weaker events are already behind her, including the inverted medley, one where no one really expected her to perform that well, and she didn't really perform that well. But we've got a run coming up. I expect her to do pretty well there. And we have an Olympic lifting total coming up. I expect her to do quite well there, although I'm not sure she will really take it. It's very difficult to predict who is going to lift what. We see PRs come out of nowhere in these events, so I'm not going to say this person is going to win. I don't necessarily want to predict that, but I know Laura Horvath, or I predict Laura Horvath will do well there. Emma Lawson and Alexis Raptis, I think they might lose some ground to Laura Horvath in that event. Although with the 5K as well, there's a lot to be seen. We'll have to tune in to find out. Either way, we like seeing big weights go up. That's what we're going to see. So there you have it. 2 days of competition down for the individuals and teams. Some surprises, only a couple big names really gone after the cuts heading into the weekend, and a lot of action left to come. Until then, I'm David Tao. Thanks for tuning in.